Was listening to the Paul Finebaum show the other day, and Paul had an interesting take on the Georgia Alabama game. And because what kind of how this popped up was someone came on the show and was talking about how Georgia had not beaten anybody or played anybody. It's just like a constant refrain on that show, which is something we've got to stop. Alabama's played plenty of people, so has Georgia, and we built Alabama into this buzzsaw at the beginning of the season because they had beaten Miami down, and it turns out Miami wasn't so hot. Well, Clemson's not so hot. They recovered; they're better than Miami, but um, we got to quit doing that. We got to quit booing players when they're on the ground too. That's something that's got to stop. So if you hearing this, that's ridiculous. You need to stop doing that. But one thing Paul was saying was, a year ago Georgia played at Alabama. This year the game would have been in Athens, and he said that he felt like Georgia would beat Alabama this year in Athens. Well, I mean, I do too. I don't think that that's a unique um, perspective to have coming into late November with the way both teams have played at this point. We're going to see these two play one another probably. I mean, Georgia's going to play in the SEC championship. We'll see about Alabama, but it sure looks like they will. I don't think it's at all crazy to say that Georgia would win in Athens. The problem for Georgia over time, since Nick Saban's been there, is the only time they've been the better team than Alabama was 2007, and that's when they beat Alabama with Nick Saban. And that game was in Tuscaloosa, obviously. And ever since then, 2008, 2012, 2015, 17, and 18, and certainly in 20, Alabama's been the better team. Now, I don't know if you could totally say that in 17, but they made one more play. So, Georgia's not been the caliber of team that a program. Georgia's not been the caliber program that Alabama has been over the last decade plus, decade and a little bit. But it's pretty clear to me now that either the guys at Georgia are confused and think they're better, or that they know they're better. And that when you know something and you're confident about it, that can be a really strong thing. It can be good or bad, but in this way, with the way that Georgia has played this season and their confidence, it doesn't seem like they're overconfident. It seems like they are living in reality, at least as far as I can tell. And I think for this colossal, game that will eventually happen, uh, it's really going to be built up into something like some sort of amazing thing. But this is going to be the first time that Georgia comes into this game as the team to beat in the game. I mean, all this time, Georgia's been, and in fact, it is a fact that they have been the underdog in all these games, with the exception of the 15 game. Okay, so in 15, I'm talking about from the 12 game on, they were they have been the underdog. I don't know how they weren't the underdog that day. They got that one wrong. That's for sure. And it didn't make sense to some of us at the time. They were a 1 point favorite. I mean, if you remember that 15 game, Alabama had lost to Ole Miss to start not to start the season, but at the beginning of the season. That was not an unbelievable Ole Miss team. It was a good Ole Miss team, and I think people kind of got um, a little confused about this Alabama situation. Of course, they ripped off however many in a row, but Bama was favored in 7, and Georgia upset them. Georgia was favored in 8 and was upset by 7. Well, by a fair amount, but they were a 6.5 point favorite. But for Georgia to be a 1 point favorite, that made no sense. Just the same way that the 18 game where they were a 12 point dog, that made no sense to me. And they were a 6 point dog at Alabama a season ago. So the vast majority of time they have been not the better team and the underdog. I don't think we're going to see that either of these. So this time, if Alabama were to beat Georgia in Atlanta, this would be just a straight upset. And we don't have lines for that yet. Those haven't popped out, but I can assure you that when I do get a line for that, I will be talking about it to you. But I think when Paul Finebaum, folks think he's got an agenda, and that's fine. I mean, I think his agenda is viewership, and that more Alabama people watch it means that more of about Alabama is discussed. But I think he basically calls it like he sees it. This past stretch of time has been all over the Gators and Dan Mullen. But don't confuse yourself. When we get to the Sunday after the Tech game, Sunday after the Iron Bowl, Sunday after Thanksgiving, everyone in the country will be focused on Georgia, Alabama, and there's a lot of reasons why. Number one, I mean, the brand names we're talking about. We're talking about two of the best programs of the last 5 years. Um, Number two, they are two of the biggest five brands in television for college football. When both of them play, people watch. I mean, Georgia just had a game against Tennessee, which was a blowout win, and they nearly got 6 million people watching that game. I mean, that's insane to watch a blowout Georgia team, a Georgia team blow out an unranked Tennessee team that's 6-5 or whatever they are. So um, Georgia, Alabama also have clashed in some really important games. 2018 national championship game, 2018 um, SEC championship game, the 2012 SEC championship game, which had over 16 million viewers. I mean, these two teams really turn people on. That's why there's so much discussion when this game rolls around and even previewing it. But Georgia, I mean, Alabama's not there yet. They should get there, excuse me, this weekend. We'll see. I mean, you never totally know with that stuff. I think the challenging thing for Bama is that they're coming off a game where, excuse me, they'll be coming off back-to-back extremely physical games, and one of them is a brutal rivalry game. I mean, if Georgia played the Gators at the end of the season, that would be that's a lot of emotion spent the week before a game where you got to have a lot of emotion too. And you know, Alabama wasn't there in 17. Alabama wasn't there in 19. We don't know what those games would have been like in Atlanta. Okay, we know what they were like, and we know what it was like a month later in Atlanta when Alabama beat Georgia for the national championship. But Alabama wasn't in the SEC championship in 19 to play. I mean, so LSU had just destroyed A&M, and that's when we knew for sure LSU is legit. Not it was everything, but it was the way they beat Texas A&M down when we got back from Atlanta and watching Georgia, beat up Tech but struggled a little bit the first half, particularly Jake Fromm. That's when we knew this is a different Texas A&M team, and excuse me, this is a different LSU team, and they sure were. I mean, boy, they were nasty. But I just I think Paul's right. Now, we won't know because these games aren't going to be played in Athens, right? I mean, Georgia's not going to play in Athens again until September 2022 when they take on SEC killer Samford Bulldogs. Um, but I think he's right, and I think I'll tell you right now, I'll pick Georgia to beat Alabama. I'm not shy about it. They're the better team. They should win the game. Doesn't mean Alabama can't win. I don't know what the spread will be. I think it's going to be about 3 or 4 for Georgia. Will be the favorite, but it won't be a ton. And that's not a coin flip, but it's pretty close to a coin flip. So Georgia's going to have to go and prove it. But Georgia doesn't have a loss. They didn't play the way that the Gators. They didn't play the Gators the way that Alabama did. We're going to see how they play against Auburn and Arkansas. Those are the teams, common opponents. But the Texas A&M loss, the game with LSU. I mean, there's just been too many times where you kind of been saying, "Hey, there's a problem here. There's a problem here with Alabama." Nick knows how to solve things, and he's got 3 games here. He's got to get right. They can't lose again now. Whether they get to Atlanta and beat Georgia or not, they wouldn't get in with 2 losses. There would have to be all sorts of madness happen for that to be the case. But I think Paul's right. I mean, I think if Georgia would play Bama in Athens, particularly this year, they would win. I'd be curious to see what the line would be in Tuscaloosa. Would that game be a toss-up, a total pick 'em, or would Alabama be like a point favorite? And would the game in Athens be more like a 7 point Georgia, uh, or they would be a 7 point favorite? I mean, Alabama's not exactly the underdog very often. That's happened once this past decade, and that was on the road at Athens, a 1 point underdog. And that shouldn't have been the case. I think we know that's true. All right, we'll see you over on the website, dogpost.com.